My conversation today is with Auri Ferris, a goldsmith of several years and an initiate of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in North Carolina. Auri's spiritual background is extremely diverse, being influenced by various forms of paganism, folk herbalism, Buddhism, and elements of the Western esoteric tradition. Her craft seems to be an extension of all these, and her methods of tuning into the bounteous natural environment around her, as well as the psychosphere of ideas and images of the same, are a kind of lifestyle magic in and of themselves. I sat down with Auri at my home in rural North Carolina to talk about her craft, spirituality, recent motherhood, and the alchemical analogy of real spiritual initiation. I'm Ike Baker, and this is the Arcanvm Podcast. Because I'm not 100% certain, what do you call what you do?
Metalsmithing. In technicality, it's called goldsmithing.
Goldsmith.
To do what I'm doing. Silversmithing. Even though I work with silver, it's called goldsmithing. That's making jewelry and stuff. Silversmithing is making like cups and vessels and stuff. So okay. I don't really do that.
Okay.
Which we should probably go over that on here.
We are.
Okay. Are we talking right now? Okay.
This is how it gets done.
Oh, okay.
Just because it's like, you can't, it's got to be
yeah.
comfortable, you know?
Yeah.
And go.
That's
so
incredible.
Yeah, so you're specifically goldsmithing. You don't do any of the silversmithings.
Yeah, just, working on that scale of, like, making cups and this and that. Like, you have to have a huge amount of heat to heat up that amount of metal to
right.
make, like, a huge piece, right? So, I use acetylene, and so I have, like, a tank in my backyard. Don't tell my insurance company that. Someone that I went to school with called it creating stories in metal. And I really liked that. Yeah.
Is that what you went to school for?
Yeah.
Really?
I went to university for political science and African studies, and realized pretty quickly that wasn't going to take me anywhere, and I didn't enjoy like
being angry all the time?
Yeah. Yeah. So I quit, and I was just like selling furniture and like doing retail and like just random whatever. So I found a community college that was like 20 minutes from my house. Had no idea they had a craft program. So I did the metalsmithing program, jewelry and metals, and I applied. They only accept like 8 people a year, and I was the 8th person they accepted. And
that's awesome.
The day that I got the acceptance letter was Imbolc, which is for the goddess Bridget, who is the goddess of metalsmithing, which I found out later.
That's amazing.
It was like, and randomly, I had like done this thing for Imbolc that year, which I had never done before, where you put a piece of cloth outside, and overnight, when the dew collects on it, you go back out in the morning, you collect it, and that is like a healing cloth for the rest of the year. And that's like a thing connected to Bridget, because she's healing, poetry, metalsmithing. Something that a lot of my jewelry that I was doing for a while was connecting poetry back to the jewelry. So it's kind of weird how that like came together.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's great, yeah.
Right, yeah. Didn't plan that, just like...
Well, you're working in that current... Is that traditionally where you come from? Pagan background, kind of like, is it Norse pagan or Celtic pagan?
I was raised Southern Baptist and was very devout as a child, extremely devout, and kind of fell out of that because of some difficulties with the church that we went to. However, as I got older, I really missed feeling that devout, feeling like that complete just belief, and so I love nature. I got really into the like nature-based, paganism, I guess. But it wasn't like Norse. I did like kind of dabble with the Celtic stuff.
Kind of like neo-paganism.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what's available right now.
Yeah.
We don't know really what paganism looked like.
Right, yeah.
We have no idea.
The people who do like Reconstructionist stuff, amazing, great.
Yeah.
But, however...
That's the thing, I think that is rather than everyone trying to constantly say, well, this is the old religion and this is the old craftsman. These hermetic lineages go back all the way to the time of Zosimus of Panoples or something like. It's just this works for us right now.
Right.
It doesn't matter. Because there's an underlying current, right? And when that bubbles to the surface, it expresses itself through things like this. And so we don't have to.
It sweeps you up.
That's all it is.
It sweeps you up.
You don't have to look for legitimacy.
Right.
If it works for you, it's legitimate.
Right. And that was very much where I was, where I just followed my heart. Kind of like a path of mysticism. Just followed what felt right. And I found a lot of validity in that. I kind of like to joke, like, I'm the type of person who, instead of being paranoid, I feel more pronoid. I always feel like everything happens the way that it's supposed to. Yeah. Well, that's kind of how that path went for me.
So that's interesting to think about because, okay, so I didn't know that you went to school for this stuff. I didn't know that was the thing. I figured that you went to school and then got into this stuff afterwards. So how far back did the goldsmithing and the Celtic kind of paganism, or just paganism in general, I'm assuming that there was some kind of magic involved, or at least a belief in magic at that time, right? Or
yes, yeah.
So when did those two things meet?
Come together?
Yeah.
I have been interested in the esoteric from a young age, like most people start around, 14, 15, like. First book I got was Manly P. Hall, Seer Teachings, and
that was my first book too.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really common one,
It's right there. I mean, it's torn up.
Exactly, yeah. It's one that you could still go back to, and I was obsessed with Freemasonry for a long time.
Because of the mystery. Well, if you're reading Manly Palmer Hall,
yes.
Because he's just referring to Masonry.
Over and over, yeah. And yeah, I was obsessed with that and was kind of at this point where I was like, man, I don't know where to go from here because I'm not accepted into Freemasonry because I'm a woman, right? And so started reading like Steiner, a lot of, theosophy, anthroposophy and all of that sort of thing. And when I went to school for political science, really I was just smoking a lot of weed, and like spirituality was more like psychedelic based. Yeah. It was wonderful because it really broke open who I was. Like, I was very conservative in the traditional, like, Republican sense as I was growing up. And that was really based on just, that's how my family was. I wanted to be accepted by my family. And really, we're very clannish, kind of that Celtic thing, very, very clannish. Like, Appalachia is very similar to Scotland, Ireland in a lot of ways, and kind of came from that. And then did a bunch of psychedelics. It really broke open this like rigidity that I had. So met my husband, who actually was like an atheist Buddhist, and he introduced me to a Lama, and we did some teachings from the Lama, and that was further breaking me open into these things.
A lot of the things, it seems, that you were interested in, they were influenced by you growing up in Appalachia. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. For a long time, I'm not good at labels at all, but for a long time I was like, oh, this thing, maybe it's like Appalachian witchcraft, right? But I don't feel comfortable with saying I'm a witch. And this whole Appalachian witchcraft movement that's been going on recently, they say it comes from like wise women and our grandmothers who used herbs and all of these things. They would never use the word witch.
Right. It's herbalism. Baptists who did herbalism.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, my grandmother, when they built their house, they had to dig a well. She used dowsing to find where they're going to dig their well. And when the guy came out and dug the well, he was like, wow, y'all have like a underground river right here. Like, and she found that with dowsing. So. And
she was a Baptist.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean.
They would never go by
witch. That's the craziest thing, because there's this obsession with labeling stuff nowadays when in reality, if you just kind of use what is available to you and forget the labeling, I mean, you just have a bigger color palette.
Right.
Right? Because if you call yourself one thing, it's like, well, then these things, whatever you do has an opposite.
Right.
You know?
Right, yeah. So even to this day, labels, I struggle with that. I find validity in all paths. Mm-hmm. And I think that is what connects all humans to a certain degree. And yeah, so very winding path. Like I did Reiki and herbalism and, you know, the stuff with the llama and kind of came to this point where I was making jewelry and I got really big into casting. And I was casting a lot of nature items. So instead of carving out something, I would go out and would collect these items while I was hiking, bring them back to my shop.
Well, just for people who are listening that don't understand what casting is, can you briefly describe what that process is and how it's different?
Yeah, so casting is you have a model, and for me that would often be, let's use a twig for example. So I'd take a twig and you do what's called spruing it up. So you take a twig and you attach this piece of wax that's basically like a thick wire to the end of it, and you affix it to a base, and you put a metal ring around the base, mix up basically plaster, and pour it around this item. So you have the plaster covering the item, and then you put that in a kiln at 1800 degrees.
Wow.
I think maybe higher sometimes. I have it programmed so I don't have to remember these numbers anymore. And then you fire it in a kiln. The kiln burns out the wax and the natural material. And so all you have left is this hardened plaster within which it's basically a mold of this piece of nature that no longer exists. You flip it over, and where that wax wire was, it's created a little opening that you then pour molten metal into. And then quench it, and you have an exact replica of a piece of nature. When you heat up the metal, you use a charcoal stick. As you heat it up, all of the impurities in the metal come to the surface. And it's then they can all be scooped out. So then you have this pure material that you're working with.
That's awesome. That's
what is cast into the waiting form.
And so you got into that first. Because of your affinity with nature, obviously, you know, again, also, I don't know who's going to be listening to this, but the place where you grew up in Appalachia here, the Appalachian Mountains, it does have its own kind of tradition and connection with the local nature. Since moving here from New York, I mean, most people in New York, they couldn't tell you what kind of avian life, they couldn't tell you what kind of stuff grew in the ground there, you know, obviously downstate. Coming here and seeing all these people who, I mean, everybody I know goes wild foraging. They teach me about, they'll just point and like, well, those are rose hips, you know, and this is this kind of owl. And it's, I didn't even ask, but everybody just knows. So,
we'll tell you.
Yeah. And it's amazing. It's amazing. I've learned so much, and I'm starting to incorporate a lot of that into my living here. But it's just not every other place is as in tune with the nature as this place, as Appalachia. So that's really interesting that it really did filter your creative pursuit.
Extreme sense of place here. The Appalachian Mountains are older than fossils. There aren't fossils here. It's literally older than fossils. And when I say that our culture is very similar to Scotland, Ireland, the mountains in the Highlands of Scotland is the exact mountain range of the Appalachians. It formed as one long ridge. It actually goes under.
Really?
Under the ocean there, yeah. And when it was all one giant landmass, that was one range. It's that old.
That's interesting. And I know, forgive my ignorance, how far up, do you know how far up the Appalachian, I know they're in New York. But I don't know if they go further up, because I do know that a huge contingency of Irish and particularly Scottish, when they came to quote unquote the New World, I mean, there's a place in Canada called Nova Scotia. When they settled there, apparently it reminded them
Yes.
and at that time, it reminded them of home so much, but who knows if at that time they even knew that these are the same mountains.
Same. Well, what's interesting is there's so many of the same plant life, and that's probably one of the few reasons that those people were hardy enough to make it in the New World here.
Right.
Because they recognized the same plant life, the same climate, same environment. You know, they were comfortable here in a way that the English were not. My uncle likes to joke, you know, we're in North Carolina, people say, oh, that's the South. For sure, it is the South. However, like when you're in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina, we have much more in common with someone from the mountains of Pennsylvania than someone from the low country in Georgia.
True.
You know, so yeah, we're in the South. However, there's a very specific culture of hardiness in the mountains. Part
of that is the ability to wild forage and be in touch with the nature that's around you. Because I know that you're really good at that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it just kind of comes naturally. I you know, you're just kind of raised in it.
Now, you and your husband, you wild forage, and you guys do long nature hikes, and you're very interested, and you pay attention, right? It's not just exercise for you guys. Right. It's kind of like nature bathing and visiting kind of friends.
Yes.
You know, so...
It drives people crazy to go hiking with me because I am not there to get to somewhere. I'm just wandering around.
That's amazing.
Wandering in the wilderness.
So since you do that on a regular basis, and I know you've slowed down because you had a child recently, but when you were doing goldsmithing 80 hours a week, whatever it was, were those two daily practices informing one another?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. Yeah, my day would start, I'd get up, I'd go for a hike as soon as I could in the morning, and then come home and work with what I found, whether it be actual materia or ideas, because there is something about just being in the quiet that really facilitates the creative process. Seeing different trees, plants, flowers, animals, all of that, it very much informs what's going on in your mind. And then when you're creating, you're just taking these forms that you've collected, and whether that be in your mind or physically.
Yeah, that's important, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're picking up things with your eyes and with your hands. Like,
right. Yeah. Everything is a symbol type of thing.
Yes.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Did you have any magical practices, spiritual practices that were going on at some point in that kind of stew?
Like I said, it was very much heart-based, so it wasn't like picking up a practice from a grimoire or anything like that, right? You know, it was very much just like what felt right. Just go and sit on a rock with a waterfall and just be in it. Just be there. And I have heard people say, you know, high magic versus low magic, right? And high magic being temple magic, low magic being field magic. It was very much field magic. You're out there in the field, you're collecting, you're using what you have, what you find. I would often collect reishi, that's a big one for me. There's, you know, bloodroot and trillium and all these very specific items that I would then go home and work in my shop, and just that's what was filling my brain, and so that's what came out. And so it was very much like harvesting ideas.
That's a great way to put it.
I was very much just caught in this river of ideas and going with it, and it felt amazing. I mean, you're submerged in that, you know. And
I guess you're an idea kind of person, right?
Yeah. I've heard people say before that ideas, they exist outside of us. right? And I very much ascribe to that. I would say I'm an idea catcher. They are whizzing around outside and they're looking for someone who's open
right
to receiving them. And if you don't catch them, someone else will.
Right. I've experienced that. I think that's the case for a lot of people who are artistic. I noticed that a lot of people tend to reverence creative types. And I think, first of all, that's really bad in terms of, it's not good for the mental health of the people creating stuff to be constantly lauded and applauded like they're somebody special. Because the truth of the matter is, in my own estimation, like you say, these ideas are available. And I think artists, creative people, are just people who don't doubt the reality of the idea.
Yes.
They're not people who tell themselves that's silly or, that's not for you. It's just like, I'm grabbing this and I'm going with it. And these things are available to everyone.
Absolutely. Yes. You have to be in that receiving state. And what I find interesting, and maybe this is crazy, I don't know, I think I was so deeply entrenched in a receiving state. That's how I got pregnant.
Yeah.
My husband, we were married for quite a long time. And it was only recently that we had a child. So that's very much a receiving kind of thing.
Yeah.
And very much a creative process. And it all feels very entwined.
Yeah. So since your practice has slowed down, do you still source inspiration? And are you still paying attention to these ideas? Or, and if so, how is it now that you kind of gather the ideas as you're talking about? What do you do now?
Yeah, it is very much different now. Because of the danger involved in jewelry and metalsmithing, my son does not come in the shop with me, and I haven't been able to be out there much. But I'm a creative person. I couldn't just stop. So now I just decorate my house all day. I just move things around. I had to be creative in some way. Absolutely had to. And so there's something about just moving materials around that translates from jewelry to interior design to anything like that. It all translates. From texture to form and overall composition, all of those things, and it's the same for anything.
And it's interesting that the two relate to one another in your case, because meaning like this kind of interior design or redesign, because what you're doing creatively is you're taking pieces of a place, whereas other people could be crafting an image of a person or some kind of completely fictional idea. You are sourcing stuff and trying to take a piece of a place with you, or give that to somebody else. And that to me is very relevant to what you're talking about, is rearranging your place.
Yes, hands-on. I don't plan jewelry. I don't have a plan going into almost any piece that I make. I put my hands on the material, work from there. Put my hands on the tools, work from there, rearrange. It very much translates and drives my husband crazy that I keep moving everything around.
I'll bet.
Yeah. But I do what I can. There is something incessant about creation. There is absolutely something incessant. When you are in that receiving state, you can't just stop. You cannot. You will go crazy. You have to be doing something, and that's where I'm at right now, where I'm doing what I can. I'm moving stuff around. I'm getting a very air of earth interpretation of
what's going on inside of your psyche, especially with all the movement, you know, the air, but also being in touch with the creative process. I think, I'm going to butcher this, but I'll paraphrase that Marcus Aurelius quote: Mother Nature loves nothing so much as to take old things, break them down, and make new things with them.
Absolutely. And that is casting. That is the casting process. You're taking, you know, silver can be cast indefinitely. Now you do have to add fresh silver when you're casting because it loses integrity each time it's cast. So even if I'm recycling silver, I have to add fresh silver in. But it is taking these forms from God, from nature, and putting them into this mold. That's why I love to work with nature, because nature is God's ultimate form. It's perfect. Why would I not start there?
You were talking earlier a little bit about impurities rising to the surface during the casting process, and you have to scoop them out.
Yes.
Is there any overlap for you with alchemical work? Have you dived into any of that stuff? Is there any overlap for you?
There's very much a metaphor there. Very much a metaphor there. And what I found interesting is, I'll go into that a little bit, but what I found interesting is that as I was working in that way, scooping out the impurities and purifying, it very much affected who I was. When I started making jewelry, I had all sorts of character flaws, really. Still do. However...
Well, yeah, you're in a human body, so...
Yeah, right. Right. But it very much was influencing decisions that I was making. I knew that I could be better. And by working on this material in my hands, there was very much a correspondence between the jewelry and myself, the material and myself.
A lot of people have mentioned to me this kind of curiosity how practical alchemy relates to the Western esoteric tradition, ritual initiation, magic, all that spiritual alchemy.
Right.
What would be the point, right? Because we know that there's a spiritual alchemical tradition, but there's definitely a practical alchemical.
Physical,
yeah.
yes.
So one thing is that a lot of people don't seem to be aware of is that in modern practical kind of like spagyric alchemy, you're creating a process as a relative microcosm to your macrocosm.
Yes.
And then you're right. It's the same thing with the Eucharist.
Yes.
I'm doing this thing here. It's an alchemical process, and I'm going to consume it. But the process of it also is symbolic of what I want to have happen to me.
Yes.
That's the idea behind modern practical alchemy. Like, God help us if we were just trying to make gold.
Yes. Yeah.
So
yeah. Good luck.
Yeah. So that's very
It's like casting. It's textbook Solve et coagula. Textbook. The solids dissolve into a liquid, form back into a solid, and in that process, it's purified and cast into a new form, into a perfect new form.
Right.
Because it's a piece of nature. It's perfect.
Right.
Right. Even in its imperfectness, it's perfect. And I can't create a form as well as God, as well as nature.
Right.
So that's what I work with, you know.
Yeah. So you see some kind of analogy there for the purification of the personality. Obviously, you underwent that.
Yes.
At a certain point after that work, you were led to on a somewhat of a different spiritual trajectory.
Path, yes.
Yeah. So you were doing all this kind of alchemical metallurgy,
right.
being in nature and purifying, purifying the dross out of these metals.
Consecrating fire.
Right, exactly.
Right. Water, fire, all of it, yeah.
Right, and you went through that, and at the end of that, right, at the tail end of this process you're talking about, being submerged in creativity, then comes the pregnancy,
right.
and at the same time, then comes the Golden Dawn.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and it was exactly the time that I was not able to work as much anymore that I was initiated into the Golden Dawn. It exactly came together time-wise the week that I was initiated as a neophyte was the week I found out that I was pregnant. The very week. And I never saw myself as a ceremonial person, a temple magic kind of person. Like, no, that is not where I saw myself at all. That's too rigid, too intellectual, too, all of those things. Yeah. I was the hippy dippy flowing in the river type, right? And still am. I find that there is this preconception that in temple magic there's no room for that. False. That is completely false. And it is working within a structure that flowing river can create form.
Yeah. And typically what I find is that the grimoire magicians are too afraid to work with their feelings, to do the field magic, to do the be here now, go with the flow type of thing.
Right.
And the field magicians are, they're partially so, they're enjoying this because it's a very pleasurable feeling.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is.
Believe me, I know. But also, I find some resistance to this idea that of really knowing what's going on, really understanding the processes. So, but what I think is like
applying an academic approach.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
And I think there might be some kind of insecurity in that too. Feeling like, well, I'm not constitutionally good at that kind of work. So it's bunkum. It's look at how good I'm doing without it.
Yes.
But in reality, I mean, that's alchemy, the marriage of the two, the union of the opposites.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say that because in that flowing state, in that flowing state, I thought, it can't get any better than this. Obviously, I'll just keep getting better at what it is that I'm doing, right? However, in being thrown into this rigid structure, it's gotten so much better. It creates what is it? You can't build sandcastles in the air, or you can't build castles in the air and then create the foundation underneath them.
Right.
Right. You have to have the foundation underneath you and build on top of that. And that's where I was. I was building these castles in the air, and they needed the structure, they needed the rigidity of something to hold them up.
Yeah.
They needed the earth beneath the air.
Right. That's its natural place.
Yes.
That's an analogy that I'm constantly finding. I would say I was fortunate enough to go through a career in music before that to understand that, where it's like you pick up a pair of drumsticks or you pick up a guitar. You don't want to be sitting down and learning the scales and learning the modes and learning how to read and write music. It's boring. You want to play. You want to jam out.
Right.
You want to do what the pros are doing without having done what they did to get there.
Have you ever listened to someone play jazz who has no sense of scales or anything like that? It's the worst jazz you could possibly...
Yeah. It's true jazz. No, but that's the thing. I mean, after that, people who haven't gone through that process do not understand the freedom that is a product of it.
You learn the rules before you break them.
Right. But the reason why you're able to break them is because they become a part of you.
Yes.
And now I'm improvising in the same way that I improvise with my personality, because all of these powers, all of these things, they've become a part of my personality. Right. It's not just something I do once a day for a half an hour. It's my entire existence is just, moving this stuff into the ether out of me and absorbing it through me.
Right.
Know? And that's the benefit of the marriage of both. That's why I spend, so much time in the garden and stuff like that, because I know I need that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My husband, who was an atheist when we met and we got married, and I had some thoughts a few times. I was like, man, you're married to an atheist. What are you doing? Right? Because he was very much like, I was not on that plane. I've never, ever considered myself an atheist. There is something there. And I experienced it as a child in the church in such a way, filled with the Holy Spirit, that I could never turn my back on that. You know, and then to psychedelics, and then to all, like, there is something there. There's no way I could deny that. And then I don't know, my husband just had a moment where he realized there is something there, and he's the one who found the Golden Dawn chapter that we applied to. And when he found it and he applied, he, like, just kind of casually mentioned it. He was like, yeah, I applied to the Golden Dawn. I was like, whoa, 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 that's my thing. That is what are you doing? But I'm so glad that he did, because it has been transformative in a lot of ways. And, you know, everything that I was making jewelry-wise was very symbolic. And what is the Golden Dawn but names and images?
Right, yeah.
Symbolism. And, yeah, I have not been able to create jewelry since that, and all I can think about is, like, wow, names and images is, like, exactly what the jewelry process was for me. The poetry, the physical images, all of these things, you know. Yeah.
So you haven't done any real work steadily since then, but you did have one commission, right?
I did.
We have a mutual friend who is becoming a bishop in the Gnostic Church, the ACGRC, of which, you know...
Which I'm also
we're associated with. I'm a deacon.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that experience. I know that you had some interesting things going on with working with that particular stone. I don't know too much about it.
Yeah, so he was going to be... Is it ordained?
Consecrated.
Yeah. As a bishop, and it's traditional to have a bishop's ring, and I happen to have some skills in creating rings, and so he mentioned wanting a ring that was a modern day interpretation of the ring that Carl Jung wore, which was what's called an intaglio, and it's a carved image onto the front of a stone, and that specific image that Carl Jung had was an Agatha diamond. Is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah, Agatha diamond, yeah.
And
the good demon, the guide of good counsel.
Yes. And so he was like, yeah, you can do that, right? And I was like, yeah, sure.
Why not?
Why not? And I have never carved a stone before that, but I was very intrigued. I was like, you know what? I know the process, just haven't done it. So I'm going to go for it. And so we used an agate, a red agate, beautiful carnelian, and carved a lion-headed serpent right in the front of that thing, and had it set into a silver ring. And doing research into those, the intaglios were very, very popular, like 2nd and 3rd BCE and beyond in Greece and Rome and all of those areas. And so now, after doing all that research, I'm just fascinated with it, and I can't wait to start carving more stuff, do more modern interpretations, because they often had very specific symbolism. And there is something about jewelry that I love. It is adorning the altar of your body, right?
That's wonderful.
It's you can't put it any better than that.
Yeah. Expressing yourself too, you know.
Yeah, I just love the way when you cast the silver into this form of nature, they're immortalized. The form is immortalized. You know, a twig will die and rot away. Silver will last forever, and so it's really elevating this earthly form transmuted into a material that will last. I had this quote by Maud Gonne, those through who the spirit has once spoken are immortal, and the spirit spoke through the twig. Then you cast it into silver, it's immortal.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And I was thinking about your previous video where you talk about Absoluth as archetypes. Mm-hmm. Archetypes are molds. Mm-hmm. You cast with molds. You create form with molds. You create images through archetypes, through molds. And so that's very much as above, so below kind of work. Mm-hmm. in all aspects.
Yeah. You know, it's kind of like immortalizing a perfect form, right? Because it's nature. And I think that you know, that was a huge impetus for the art of like sculpture and stuff like that. Obviously the human body is nature too, right? And at that time period, right, a lot of the thought process was, this is the perfect form, because this is the, you know, the apex of creation.
Right.
Yeah, but you know,
created in God's image.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
That was the idea at the time. So that's really interesting to me. You're kind of like immortalizing or memorializing, you know, these natural forms. Mm-hmm. And part of me wonders how much, right, you have this kind of like creative stream that you've tapped into, and constantly being in nature and this connection there, and it's like wanting to recreate nature yourself,
right?
The ultimate act of which is having a child, I think.
Yeah, it's true. And to go back to Golden Dawn symbolism, you know, as a neophyte, you're purified and consecrated through water and fire 4 times, right? And when you're working with silver, you know, people often think of using hammers, right? And you're hammering the silver and you're moving the silver when you're like stretching it or creating the form that you want to create. So there's casting, which just creates that form you already have. And then there's also, I would pair it with pieces that I had hammered into place and that sort of thing, and in the creation of it. And metal is actually much like pottery, like wet clay, that it moves, you know, but as it moves, it becomes more rigid. As you create this form, it becomes rigid, more rigid, more rigid, and it will get to a cracking point. And if you want to keep working with it, you have to torch it and relax all of those molecules. So you have to torch it and then you quench it. And so you have the fire and the water, and it's being consecrated and purified before it's ready to go again. Mm-hmm. You know? And
definitely so an analogy there.
Right, and you may do that process several times before you get to that point. And you can create beautiful, simple forms with just one. It's called annealing when it's torched.
Annealing?
Annealing, yes. It's annealed in the fire. It softens it back to a form that can be shaped more. A great work of art will be subject to many blows of the hammer over and over again. It gets rigid, gets more rigid, and then you go through the annealing process again, and it's ready to be shaped even further. You can push silver very far, as long as you catch it before the cracking point. And
as opposed to other metals, they don't really have that same kind of malleability.
Some don't.
Yeah. Well, I know everybody wants to work with gold most of the time, right?
Oh, gold is a fantastic metal to work with.
It's the most malleable, right?
Cost prohibitive, but yes. Gold is like working with butter. I mean, it is a gorgeous metal, and the luster, and there's a reason that it is known as the pinnacle of metals, right? So in that metaphor there, someone may work on themselves, but you hit this point where you're too rigid. You have to be purified, you have to be consecrated before you can go further. You have to catch yourself before the cracking point.
Right. And I think what's really interesting is that you catch yourself, maybe. I don't know if you catch yourself. I think when you plug into certain currents and you begin to engage with those things seriously, you do get to that point of rigidity. And I see a lot of people stop and stay in that form because they can sense that a breaking point. I can't go any further.
Right.
So I'm going to rigidify. And a lot of people get stuck there.
And that is when sacrifice comes in. The fire, the annealing, you know. Yeah. That's when that comes in, and you have to sacrifice yourself over and over and over again in the great work, and in a great work of jewelry, you catch that point just before, and you have to recognize the material. You have to work with the material, get to know the material, get to know yourself.
Yes.
Right? You have to know it inside and out for both making jewelry and for working on yourself. Right. You have to know the signs. Right? Yeah.
And these are things that the path of a craftsman or a craftsperson, these are realities, and that becomes, they have such depth, these analogies, you know, and you really only begin to understand them if you go through them, if you pursue a path of crafting and stuff like that. You know, I really believe that.
The funny thing about it, though, is that's not what you're thinking about when you're creating.
Right. Yeah.
We can sit back and talk about it all day long after the fact, and recognize these patterns. But when you're in it, it's just you and the metal and the tools and the fire and the water. It's just you and these pieces of earth.
Yeah.
You're not heating up metal and going, and now I cast this perfect form of God. Like, none of that's happening. You're in the moment.
I think that's what a lot of people will disagree with me, and that's fine. But personally, I was explaining to somebody recently, I had somebody who asked, you know, okay, I get the Kabbalah, I get astrology, where does alchemy come into play? It's less tangible. There's no one school of thought in terms of alchemy, and the writing is very obscure. It's the most obscure, right? The Kabbalah is kind of obscure, but you know what it's talking about for the most part. Whereas alchemy is an analogy within an analogy. But it seems to me that it was kind of reverse engineered.
Yes.
You know, a lot of people who have been focused on this practical side just for, I don't know, power over the elements or something like that. I think they've had the wrong end of the stick for a very long time. You know, the thing is that alchemy itself is symbolic of a process that pre-existed it.
Yes.
Right? So it's you can find analogies for the relationship between humans or nature, the natural world and the divine world in almost everything we do.
Right. Right. And the thing is, you will never have power over the elements. You come to know the elements. You come to know the breaking point of silver. You work with it. You recognize it. You may think, oh, I can do one more hammer blow. I can push it. I have power over this. False. It will crack. Your piece will be ruined. You must recognize.
That's so interesting. I've never been able to put the two together. I read a quote. I think this was in something Manly Palmer Hall wrote. I don't know who the source is, but it has stuck with me all these years. The initiate, and again I'll paraphrase, the initiate can only command nature insofar as they will obey her.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I am a slave to the silver. The silver is the one in control here.
Right.
Truly. I can exert force as much as I can, but she will break in your face and laugh that your form is gone.
Yeah, and that's life.
Yeah.
That's life. And but I think one of the advantages of really actively engaging with a current is that it will help you through that process. Certain currents of magical energy, and that people listening can do their own research into this, because that's a podcast episode in and of itself. Currents and egregores and things like that. But
which you should do.
You definitely should do. Yeah. It will. They can either help or they can hinder. Depending on what the current is habitually doing. If it's a current of dissolution, then everything's just going to dissolve. But if it's a little bit more balanced, then it will help you, recongeal. I think that can be, in my own experience, that's been a tremendous boon for me in something like the Outer Order, where it was like I did not possess the wherewithal to be able to, like you say, reintroduce heat to the whole process. So something else kind of...
Oh, you don't want to walk into the fire.
Heavens no. You don't want to break either. So you just you stop the work at rigid.
You stay where you are, yeah. And that too is the worst place you can be. To be stuck.
Yeah. Mid-transformation.
Right.
And that's something I think as quote-unquote spiritual people, we have to understand in our dealings with one another, is that you're kind of always seeing somebody in the middle of their process. There's no perfected being. It's not going to happen. It's not supposed to happen.
Right. Yeah, it's like a caterpillar stopping in the cocoon.
Right.
You're just goo. You're not worth anything.
You hear that? Keep going. I hope that's the fire that you need to be lit under your ass to keep going.
It's true.
All right, so now for that final question. 3 books, movies, artists, whatever it is, any kind of media that you would either recommend to people who are interested in anything we talked about, or just in general.
Yeah. First and foremost, anyone who is... This isn't a cult by any nature, but anyone who's interested in jewelry, the Bible of jewelry making, the first book that I got for jewelry making, The Complete Metalsmith by Tim McCreight. It covers everything that you could possibly need to know. And if you're interested in making jewelry, utilize YouTube, there are lots of community colleges out there with classes and that sort of thing. Because it is a very transformative process. And if you're someone who likes to work with their hands, yes, absolutely, go for it. I would encourage anyone, because it is such a... really lets you get yourself out, like that creative fire. It's wonderful. Yeah,
we've all got it. Yeah. No matter what you think about yourself, there's a creative side to you.
And there is nothing that feels better than just hammering the shit out of a piece of metal. I mean, truly.
I believe you.
It feels great. And then torch it. It's just all of that.
What about the quenching? Is that fun?
It's fun. It makes a great noise. Yes. Oh, it's fabulous. It's fabulous. All of it feels good to do. If you're someone who is brand new to occultism, one of the first books that I read past Secret Teachings was, and we've talked about this before, it's kind of an interesting, funny book. I wouldn't say there's any quote-unquote truth there, but The Secret History of the World.
I love that book.
It's wonderful just to read. It really made me think in a different way, and you have to get your brain to that point where it's not so rigid. So reading something that does not make sense to your existing worldview is so important. Suspend your belief or disbelief. Suspend that and just believe in something that's different from what you currently believe in. And that's the first step on chipping away at that hard shell,
That's Mark Booth, right? The author?
That sounds right, yeah.
Yeah. That's a great one.
Yeah, I also love the Mystical Kabbalah I've read it probably 5 times now, and each time there's something different that I take from that. It's almost like reading a new book every single time.
Absolutely.
Every single time.
And it's funny because any like serious occultist I've ever spoken to says the same thing about that book.
Yeah. It feels like a brand new book each time. Things will hit you differently depending on where you are in your path.
Right. Book doesn't change, you do.
Yes, exactly. That's the Unfortune. Mm-hmm. And I just finished reading Women of the Golden Dawn, and fabulous book.
Right?
Fabulous.
Mary K. Greer.
Yeah. Wonderful biographies of 4 leading women of the early Golden Dawn days. It made me want to put that book down and start studying my grade work.
Yeah. I could tell you came in with the Maud Gonne quote.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Most people never heard of Maud Gonne.
Came in hot with that one. Yes. Wonderful book, and it really gives you an insight into occultism is not you sitting at your desk reading a book. It is you out in the world living your life. Mm-hmm. And to see examples of where these women were with their lives at the same time as going through the work.
All of them highly, highly, highly influential, not just in their communities, but like in the world we have now.
Yes, absolutely. Annie Hornman, theater. It really busted me out of the thinking of occultism as, sitting up late at night reading and studying and all of those things. That's important too, don't get me wrong. But when you wake up in the morning, you go out and you live your life in the world, in the physical Malkuthian world. Yeah. That's where we are. And you have to utilize that just as much as any, intellectual this or that. You have to apply it. You can't just learn and learn and learn and learn and never apply it. That's silly.
It's kind of a species of hoarding.
Right.
It's selfish.
Right. You have to work on yourself in this world. Live your life.
Right. Yeah.
So it is the application of what you learn. That's the most important. And that's who people will remember you for. Mm-hmm. They're not going to remember you for the books that you've read. Mm-hmm. That doesn't matter. What did you do with that? Right.
What did you do with that inspiration that those books gave you, or the information? And that's, again, that's that alchemy, the union of opposites.
Right.
That receptive state of like, I really enjoy being in this receptive state and learning, mm-hmm. and knowing. Mm-hmm. And then you have to get into that active state. And some people are, I think I really like this, some people are all action and no theory, and some people are all theory and no action.
Right.
So be both.
Walker between the worlds. Right.
Yeah, that middle path.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. I really appreciate you sitting down with me.
Yeah.
Auri Ferris, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is a great conversation. We covered so much ground. I'm not even sure what I'm going to title this episode, but
I know you'll come up with something.
Yeah, right. I'm a man of action.
That's right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.